This is Paul Nobles from eattoperform.com. I am sitting here with April Blackford. April, if you want to say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody.
So basically, we have kind of a smaller class right now. We do have a question right off the bat. April, did we have any questions from the forums this week?
Mm-mm.
Okay, let's see. Um, Steve is asking, what are your thoughts on taking protein before bed? I mean, definitely not a negative. I don't think it's magic by any stretch of the imagination. The it depends on how you're taking it. I'm assuming the way that asked the question, he's referring to a supplement. I know a lot of people will take casein as a supplement before bed because it's kind of a slower acting um, uh, supplement, and because it coagulates differently than whey protein does in your stomach, and so at nighttime it tends to load in a way that is kind of more effective, or most people like doing it that way. It didn't sound too great, but do you have any thoughts on that, April? I mean, casein as opposed to whey or protein before bed?
Um, like what you said, I don't really think it's a negative. If you're hitting your protein macros throughout the day, I don't really see a need for it, because you're basically sleeping, so I don't think you're really gonna, you know, need the protein to protect your muscles or anything like that. Unless you prefer, I have seen some people who prefer to do the casein or, a protein and fats before bed rather than having carbs. I prefer to do carbs personally. So I think everybody's different. But I do think that if he's hitting his protein levels daily, I don't really think that there's, any great, you know, protection or benefit from adding extra in.
I mean, Steve, do you have a specific question as it relates to this? I mean, are you talking about taking supplements, or are you talking about meat, as an example? Certainly, I think if you were talking about real food, um, I think it could probably get a little dicey too close to bedtime. But he is saying supplements, protein powders. I, you know, I think the one thing with casein is that the flavor isn't all that great. And usually, I used to take the Progenics Cocoon. I don't anymore, um, just because I didn't like the taste. I did like the L-tryptophan in it. Kind of a side note on what April was saying, I have started going to a little bit more of bodybuilding style training a couple times a week, and one of the things that I have done is add um, like I don't know why I can't talk today, but like a cereal before bed. So been having something like a cinnamon toast crunch, or cocoa pebbles or something of that nature with um, uh, light coconut oil, and I mean,
Coconut.
yeah, coconut milk. I'm sorry, coconut milk. Man, just drops me. I mean,
I told you that ages ago. Like,
last night I woke up and I was like in a pool of a pool of drool because I was in such deep sleep. But um, I think that's a little bit of an advanced technique. I mean, depending on where you're at, I wouldn't say that for someone just trying to get carbs in, that would be something I would jump into immediately. But if you're finding that you're consistently low on carbohydrates, like, I have to admit that I um, tend to be sometimes. I mean, as an example, I've been a little bit more consistent with rice. So I've been buying these packets of rice that is right at 80 grams. And when you put 80 grams of cooked rice into a bowl, you realize how little rice you actually eat the majority of the time. Um, I mean, because 80 grams of rice, as an example, would be like if you went to Chipotle and ordered double rice. You know, and so I've been a little bit more cognizant of how much I'm eating, and that's been helpful. My weight, hasn't been, normally I sit at about 177. If I wanted to, I could get to 175 real easy, but lately I've been right at 178, and I'll spike up to 180, and then I'll do a control day and then back to 178. If I don't know if anybody had followed my Instagram challenge where I got down to 175, and so the question would be, well, wait a second, Paul, you're saying that you're 177, 178. Well, part of the idea is to build muscle in the times that you're not dieting, and so I can't remember how long that would have been, maybe 2 months ago, right? And so ideally by, let's say, January, I will have gained, somewhere in the neighborhood of 2 to 4 pounds of muscle. And so if I stopped at 175 before, and I end up being 179, but 4 pounds of that is muscle, then I accomplished my goal. So I just kind of set things differently. So for instance, if I was trying to go lose body fat, and but I went from 175 to 179, then I don't really need to lose. Like my starting point is 179 now, not 175. Does that make sense, April? Did I just?
Absolutely. No, absolutely.
Because I think what happens with a lot of people is, and I remember this distinctively, where I was talking to a gal, and she was really super concerned because when she was at 143 pounds, she was 17% body fat, and she just didn't think that she could get back to 143 because she was closer to 160. And so I looked at her numbers, and the thing that stood out to me was that in between the time that she was 143 and 160, she gained 9 pounds of muscle. And so basically you would add that 9 pounds plus 143, so she would basically get back to 152 to break even, if that makes sense. So that would have gotten her back to 17%, but she would then have 9 pounds more muscle. A lot of people don't think of it that way, and that's why having the numbers in front of you tend to be pretty helpful. Let's see, I'm not sure if it would be pronounced Lana or Lana, but let's see. Lana is saying, I've been using ACG3 as my pre-sub workout. Are you familiar with ACG3, April?
No, I'm not.
Okay. As recommended by another female friend, both times I've gone to the health store to buy it. The guy practically tries to talk me out of buying it because it's more for men. At this point, I'm trying to lose fat more than muscle. Is the creatine possibly defeating this purpose? Is there a better supplement I should try? I'm really just looking for energy to get through the why. Well, a couple thoughts on that.
Now, is the ACG3 an actual creatine?
She's saying hi, April. So apparently she.
Yeah, I know her.
Okay. Well, there's creatine in it. Can you?
Yeah, I'm about to find out what it is.
Okay. Because I'd be interested to know what the rest is. But the creatine should not affect you dramatically. Any guy saying that creatine is for guys is an idiot.
Crazy.
Are you seeing it yet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it looks like it's similar to, let me see what's in it. It looks like it's similar to something like C4. Let me see what's,
So it's basically caffeine, creatine.
let me see how much it actually has of the creatine in it. Yeah, it's only 10 calories. It's got calcium, it's got some sodium, 2 grams of carbs, the ACG3 charged blend, the NitroFlow blend. It looks like it's got a bunch of blends, which, you know, I personally, with any type of pre-workout, I like to get, I'm sorry, I had an update that popped up. I like to get, I like to use supplements that actually tell you exactly what's in it rather than blends. You know, kind of like the proprietary blends, you know, where you don't actually know how much of each that you're getting. It
I
looks like
mean,
it has creatine in it, but it's just trace amounts of creatine. So overall, it looks like just a regular pre-workout supplement, like C4 or something, you know, along those lines.
I'll tell you exactly what I use. I use Vivarin and creatine. Point blank. That's it. That's all I use. So I don't have any concerns about the caffeine levels or the creatine levels or all those different types of things. Um, the problems with these blends, as April is pointing out, is that it's not. They're almost hiding what is making it work. If it's a pre-workout supplement, though, typically it's a caffeine powder with some amount of creatine. And usually the amount of creatine is like 2.5 grams. It's certainly not affecting your fat loss. Are you familiar with Lana and her, is she coming from eating an adequate amount of food, or are you not familiar with that part?
My internet was going out if you asked me a question.
Okay. I was just asking you if you're familiar with if she's starting from the standpoint of eating an adequate amount of food, or
I think,
she.
I think she was actually eating an adequate amount of food.
Okay, and so fat loss.
She just needed more of a macronutrient partitioning. She's actually one of the coaching clients.
Okay. I mean, the thing that one of the things that I really, well, if you saw my article this week, when you are looking to lose fat, I think eating the similar things over and over again is one of the easiest way to do so. With some level of this is what I can go to as kind of a outside of the box thing. But typically what you've seen bodybuilders do for years, and many people that are trying to get a specific result, is they cook up all their chicken, cook up all their beef, cook up all their shrimp, put it in the fridge, and then go to it with some level of rice and some level of greens. And it's boring, but as long as you're not doing that forever, and you're kind of looking at something to 8 to 10 week periods, that can be really super effective in terms of fat loss. The other thing in terms of fat loss, and I'm pretty sure April is already hitting you with this, is you're essentially looking for the lowest amount of dose to get the maximum amount of result. One of the biggest mistakes that people make, I think, is let's say that you were a 250-pound female, right? And you're coming from an overfed background where you're eating 4,000 calories a day. But what happens for a lot of those people is they go down to 1,500 calories a day, right? And it ends up not being sustainable, and they don't feel like doing anything. What they'd be much better off doing is going down to, say, 3,000 calories, which would still end up being a lot of food, especially if they could move to more to a whole food way of eating. That would still get them a 1,000-calorie deficit, and they would also give them some room to go down further. The problem that when you start off at 1,500 is you sort of get to your floor, really quickly. And so let's say that you're, you go from 4,000 to 1,500, the level of stress with that, and then if you add any activity, your body, that's going to catch up to your body really quickly. If you start off slowly, let's say you go from 4,000 to 3,500, now you got room to move, right? And so you can, and the good majority of the time, let's say that, like, using the example of a 250-pound person that's trying to lose weight, any activity that they do will be usually beneficial for them. And so, you can create, let's say an hour's worth of CrossFit might gain them 5,000 or 500 calories of activity. So now they've reduced their food 500 calories. I don't know why I can't talk today. But they've reduced their food 500 calories, and they've added 500 calories of activity. That's essentially 2 pounds a week. I think you'd be hard pressed to do much more than that. And anything that you do more than that, you're really going to risk going into your muscle. And some people in that situation will deal with sagging skin. I mean, age tends to be a factor. There's a lot of things that happen there, but you're pretty much guaranteed to have sagging skin if you lose 4 to 5 pounds a week. Your body just can't keep up with that kind of adjustment. Do you have any thoughts on that, April?
I completely agree. That's pretty typical. And the scenario that you were saying is, if someone's been eating 4,000 calories, why would you drop down to 1,500 when you can milk it at 3,500? We've used this analogy a lot. It's kind of, I use it in the forum a lot. It's kind of like playing a game of cards. You never throw all your cards on the table in the beginning of the game. You're only going to throw 1 or 2 down and then hold your good ones, for later, to win the game, rather than, you don't throw them all at the same time,
I like the poker metaphor, that's for sure. But yeah, I mean, and even though that doesn't apply to Lana in her situation, or maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, the extreme sort of serves the point of saying that you would be much better off taking a gradual approach. And when I wrote the diet article that I wrote this weekend, that a lot of people probably got in their email, one of the things that I mentioned was, one way to keep like the food deficit lower was to add, 250 calories worth of walking, which is probably only about a half hour a day. And so you can wake up, go for a half-hour walk around your neighborhood, and boom, there's 250 calories. And so if you're cognizant of calories, you're making sure that your intake is taken care of, you can then reduce your calories only 250 calories, and it won't seem like that big of an adjustment, if that makes sense. So, but yeah, so we don't really have any other questions at this point, so I'll kind of run into a little bit more of what I'm doing currently, and then we can talk, because I know April's been doing Hatch, which is kind of interesting. If you guys aren't familiar with Hatch, it's sort of an Olympic lifting program, but it's good for building your squat by using back squat and front squat. And Danielle Horan is actually finishing up Hatch right now, and she's had some pretty big gains from it. I actually, Sunday has been my heavy day. Last week I had kind of an impromptu deload week because we had MEA week. I don't know if that's a national thing, but it's like a teacher's holiday. And so I took a deload week, so I ended up doing my heaviest day after the deload week. And so yesterday I ended up pulling 435, and then I was doing doubles at 255. Next week I'll do 285. But today I just ended up doing some body building type movements that was more upper body, and I've been kind of adding that in 2 to 3 days a week, and really liking that, and really liking how it's sort of changing my physique. I don't know that I've necessarily gained a lot more muscle, because muscle is sort of funny. It will move around, so you take from one area, or you add to one area, and sometimes it takes from another area, and it's sort of hard to quantify that type of thing. But in terms of look in the mirror, I'm really happy with the way that things are going. But also, I feel really strong and I feel really capable because not only am I doing that lifting, I have my heavy day on Sunday where it's really more of a powerlifting focus. I do a bodybuilding / speed style workouts 2 or 3 days a week, and then I have CrossFit 2 to 3 days a week. So usually I'm going to be working out anywhere from 5 to 6 days, depending on how I feel. In between all of those things, there's some running, but I don't like run 6 miles and then also CrossFit. So if I find a good long WOD that fits my goals, I'll do the WOD if I like it, or I'll do a 6 to 10 mile run, if that makes sense. My goal isn't to try and kill myself. My goal is to try and expand my work capacity, and so far it's been great. I feel I like I said, I'm only WODing 2 days a week sometimes, and I am much better in WODs. I'm much stronger in WODs, and I'm feeling really good right now. So kind of liking the direction of the way that this is going, and I do sort of attribute it a little bit to the bodybuilding stuff. I just feel stronger. I feel more capable as a result of that.
So have you increased your food?
Yes, for sure. Like I said, I have. Well, okay. I'll run through a couple adjustments I've made. One, I have protein in the morning, which is something that I wouldn't normally do. Normally, I eat just 2 bigger meals a day, and so I've just tried to add some protein. Sometimes I'll do it in oatmeal. A lot of times I just do it in a bar with coffee, and I like that. That's been a good routine. I will say this, if it's not a CrossFit day, or if it's not a Metcon day, it tends to be harder to kind of manage. Like I'll be closer to 180 on like the bodybuilding days and the strength days. Like yesterday, as an example, I ended up eating a lot of food because not only did I, work up to a 435 max, worked up to doubles on squats, and then I also did a 6-minute Tabata. So it was a lot of work. Wanted to make sure I got in a good amount of recovery, and so yeah. That and then, like I said, the carbs from the cereal at night have been pretty good in terms of recovery. I mean, I feel great. I feel like working out all the time. And a good part of that is the added food. So it's been really tempting because here in the Twin Cities, there are enough gyms that I work with that I know many of them go body fat test per my advice, and so I can go get my body fat tested fairly often, but I've had to sort of avoid it because I just don't want it to stop my goals, because I think what ends up happening a lot of times when you start to get this data is that you unconsciously change your behavior. So if I got a little too concerned about being 180 sometimes, it might not allow me to sort of keep progressing. But I've been trying to kind of keep that, into that 178 range. Because even when I was 175, and I was really honest about this when I was doing the Instagram challenge, that I would sit at 177 the majority of the time. That I wasn't necessarily always trying to get super, super low, and kind of, I don't know what's the best way to say it, but I just want to say energetic for my workouts. I mean, whenever my workouts start to get compromised, my default is to basically just go back to working out better. And so For me to be at 178 or even jump up to 180 on occasion is not overly concerning when you consider the fact that I'm trying to add muscle. And it'll be about a 4 to 5 month period. You could potentially build 5 pounds of muscle. I doubt that that's going to happen for me. Just, unless this bodybuilding stuff ends up being, and I haven't really been doing it that long, maybe a month or so. Unless that is a really huge payoff, I would be very surprised if I gained more than, say, 3 pounds of muscle, and I'd be really super happy with 2 pounds of muscle, which, for you guys, for a lot of you guys that are just starting off or coming from an under-eating background or things of that nature, you can gain 5 to 6 pounds of muscle easy, and I suggest that you take advantage of that, because it just, as you go years into this, those opportunities don't exist. And so yeah. Rachel's saying, April, I would love to learn more about Hatch, so let's talk about Hatch, and then you can give your experience and talk about the protocol, and then also anything that I can share from my Hatch experience, I will share.
What do you want to tell the basis of it? Basically, it's just a progressive strength where you're squatting. I haven't altered the actual program, but
we might have lost April again. So I'll run through what Hatch is while April is reconnecting. Basically, it's here. You're kind of in and out. Are you back with us?
Can you hear me? Wait a minute. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think my husband and my son are downstairs watching the WWE pay-per-view from last night that he recorded, so I think that it might be messing up my internet connection. Anyway, but basically it's the progressive strength where you're working off of your, your percentages, your 90%, and it goes up to 95%, I think, next week of your 1 rep max. But I have actually added in accessory work after my main working sets. I was very surprised. I think it's because I increased my food on all days, on my workout days and my rest days. But, I also do a bodybuilding, basically type training. And I was doing a 5-day split, upper, lower, having a deadlift day, a squat day, arm day, bench, and shoulders. But I dropped the arm day, and I actually take Thursday and Sunday off, and I put bench on Tuesday, deadlift on Wednesday to try to separate it from the 2 squats, and then shoulders on Friday. But surprisingly, because I remember you said that your deadlift kind of not really dropped, but you didn't really make great gains on your deadlift while you were doing it. But I actually hit 265, which is a PR on my deadlift last week. And then the week before, I actually hit 140 on my bench, which is more than body weight, so I was quite excited. So, but I'm really enjoying it. The higher volume, obviously it's higher volume. I kind of like going and looking. It seems like the first day of the week is always usually higher reps, higher weight, and then the second day of the week is usually kind of a lower percentage, lower reps.
Yeah, let me give you a little bit more insight. Basically, you would have your 1 rep max, okay, of your front squat and your back squat, and then you would multiply that by 90%, and then it has percentages based off of that. That's what April was referring to, that she's actually working to 90% of 90%, or 95% of 90%, right? The protocol in both instances, back squat and front squat, starts off with a lot of reps early on to try and build a strength base, and it really is sort of like a muscle building protocol early on, and then it gets more into strength. I was talking to Sean Waxman at a seminar that I went to in California, and Sean he trains Olympians, and one of the interesting things that Sean said was, because there was a lot of talk about hypertrophy and muscle building and things of this nature, and I said, honestly, Sean, I see a lot of body fat testing, And I see a lot of people that get stronger, but they don't really add a whole lot of muscle, right? And I said, so I'm interested what your thoughts are related to leverages and training your central nervous system. And what he said was really interesting. He said, yeah, all that hypertrophy stuff, yeah, that's all a little bit of bullshit. He said, what you're really training is your central nervous system to be able to handle the load. And he wasn't discounting the amount of muscle, right? But what he's saying is that, and what April is doing right now is she's essentially training her central nervous system to be able to handle this load. And so in terms of my deadlift and my deadlift going down, you have to understand, I mean, basically if you want to get better at anything, okay, if you want to get better at squatting, squat more. If you want to get better at bench pressing, bench press more. How I worked my deadlift up to close to 500 pounds was by deadlifting 2 to 3 days a week. And people go, well, gosh, that sounds like a lot of deadlifting. Yes, it was a lot of deadlifting, you know, but that's what got me up there. And so, but for me to get to 500 and over 500, I needed to add more mass on my body, which is a little bit of the reason why I'm kind of doing the bodybuilding thing now. But I was doing Hatch previous to this in an effort to try and kind of have a meeting of the minds. I knew I needed to get stronger with squat, which I have done, but also I also needed to put more meat on my body, you know. And in general, you know, if you go from training your deadlift 3 days a week, you know, and it wasn't really 3 days a week, it was mostly 2 days a week, but heavy 2 days a week. One of the things people don't understand about Wendler, as an example, they think that Wendler, you would do the protocol once a week, just the way that it's described. Well, you can do it 2 days a week if you want. You know, you can progress it faster if your body can handle that load, right? And so when I talk about developing work capacity and why developing work capacity is important, that's one of the reasons why I'm talking about it, is because when your body and your central nervous system can handle a beating, you can do a lot more and you can accomplish bigger and better things. And so
I totally agree. I think that the ultimate key is, you know, like what you said, you put a beating on your body. You have to be in the mindset of not dieting and eating. You know, if you want to put a beating on your body, you're going to have to eat to recover from it. You know, and I think that that's part of the reason why I've been able to still handle the 5 days a week. You know, because I've increased my calories, 300 calories on my training days, 200 calories on my rest days. You know, just because I've kind of set myself up because I want to make all the strength gains that I possibly can in this time period. And I know that I'm not going to do that by trying to eat the same calorie standpoint that I was.
yeah, that's the other thing that I think people sort of get, I don't want to say confused, but the food part isn't just to gain muscle. It's to allow for adequate recovery for both your muscles and your nervous system, right? Because if, as an example, you provide inadequate nutrition during a very stressful time, I mean, just forget about weightlifting, okay? Think of it just from a stress standpoint. When you're stressed out, you want to eat. You know, and it's actually a natural response. And one of the reasons why is because that food comforts you, you know, and that's somewhat the way that the central nervous system works. So it's not just about, you know, taking in an adequate amount of protein or an adequate amount of carbs for muscle building, because to be completely honest with you, you know, adding new tissue is very, very hard to do. What you're really doing more than anything on a daily basis is allowing for your body to adjust to the stimulus, right? And so when you put stress on your system, in this case stress being weightlifting, you need an adequate amount of food to adapt to that stimulus. Sometimes you will add muscle, but more often than not, you're really just developing work capacity. You're really just developing the ability to handle a beating, and when I say a beating, I mean just the physical wear and tear of working out, which is why when someone just starts out, oftentimes they'll experience a lot of injuries. They will get sick, right? And you go, well, why would working out a number of times make me sick? Well, partly because if you're not eating enough, it's going to compromise your immune system. So when you're around that 6-year-old with a snotty nose, boom, you get what they got. So those are sort of the things that, I just have to tell everybody, I am explaining things in a very simplistic manner that a lot of scientists would go, that's not exactly how it works. It's pretty close to exactly how it works. There's some minor details. I'm not giving you all the citations on this and things of this nature, and we're not doing a whole ton of research here. But the reality is when you keep food out of the equation, it makes the adaptation really much harder. And so if you're eating inadequate amount of food, you're working out all the time, not only are you not adjusting to that stimulus and getting stronger as a result, and then you'll miss lifts and all this other type of stuff, but it also compromises other areas of your life as well. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
I never know if the WWE is taking you away or not, but
no, it makes plenty of sense. Just we've talked about it before. Just training in general is a stressor on your body. Whenever you don't eat enough calories and you're in a negative energy balance, that's a stress on your body. Your body's constantly trying to find a state of homeostasis, and when you're constantly battling on each end, it has to work harder, and it makes plenty of sense.
So what I think everybody really wants to know, though, is does your husband call it wrestling or wrestling?
Wrestling. He's from Maryland, so he's not Southern like I am.
Because pretty much everybody I know calls it wrestling. So far, I have increased. This is Rachel again. So far, she was the one that asked you about Hatch. So far, I've increased my calories according to ETP calculator, which has made a significant difference in my energy levels and recovery. Now I just have to tweak the macros. I've always tended towards more fat and protein versus carbs and protein. I'm just happy to be fed and looking forward to learning more. I think I have an article actually that's coming out at 8:30, and the article basically is titled 5 Things That Your Nutrition Coach Should Be Asking You. And the first thing that your nutrition coach should be asking you is, what do you weigh? That bothers a lot of people when I say it, and I'm going to continue to say it because, it's not that weighing yourself ends up being the most important thing. It's just one of many metrics that you would want to use, but it tends to be a really convenient thing. Why don't you weigh yourself? Partially because it consumes you because you don't want to know the answer, right? Or you're getting the wrong answer usually it's not going down. In my case, I weigh myself daily. I don't really care if the scale, I know that the scale should go up and should go down, right? That's part of this process. But in your case, Rachel, where you say that you're kind of making these changes, the one thing that I definitely would encourage you to do is make sure that your weight is not going up too quickly. And talking to April and many of the people in the Science Lab of just how to tweak those macros and control days and things of this nature, because we're not in the business of people putting fat on, right? And so it's really confusing to people. It's like, well, wait a second, if you say I'm under eating and it turns out I'm only eating 1,400 calories a day, and you want me to eat 2,400 calories a day, why wouldn't I gain weight? Well, you would gain weight if you just ate 2,400 calories a day, right? Um, but let's go over a few scenarios where you wouldn't gain weight. First of all, you probably didn't need to be eating that aggressively low, right? So when you start to add food into the equation, all of a sudden you have a little bit more energy. So that increases your NEAT, which is your non-exercise activity thermogenesis. I can't remember the exact acronym, but it's basically things you do when you aren't working out, right? So if you were 1,400 calories and somewhat lethargic, now all of a sudden, because you added more energy, you'll be able to move around a little bit more just kind of naturally, right? You'll sleep better, so your recovery becomes a little bit better. But also, if you take rest days and you go a little lower on calories, sometimes even as low as the calorie point you were at before. We're not trying to get people to go from, let's say, 1,300 calories to 2,400 calories immediately, right? Let's see, she's given a response. I wasn't eating aggressively low, but I wasn't eating enough for my activity levels. Yeah, and like I said, I also fall into this every now and again. I mean, when my history basically comes from mostly processed foods, eating like a moron, right, to moving towards eating mostly whole foods, protein and fat-based, right? Pretty similar to paleo. I never called it paleo, but I didn't avoid carbohydrates, but they weren't super huge. I've had to move into more of a way of thinking related to carbohydrates to sort of reach my goals. Like, April's aware of this, but I got down to 149 and 99% body fat. I'm now 175 pounds, 25 pounds more muscle in that process, right? And so what you sort of run into in these scenarios is you sort of limit what your capabilities are by limiting your food choices. When you have strategic carbohydrates around your workouts and in adequate amounts, it allows that protein turnover, it allows for better workouts, it allows for more recovery, it allows for stimulus, and then all of a sudden you've got 25 pounds more muscle that happened over the course of 6 or 7 years, right? It's not something that happens immediately. For a lot of people, it will happen really quickly, though, because if you haven't been working out very much and then you start working out and eating in appropriate amounts, you can't gain 10 to 15 pounds of muscle relatively quickly. That's just addressing the deficiencies that you had in your approach. And so once you've addressed those deficiencies, after that, it really becomes more of a lesson in patience. Did you have anything to say about that, April? Because we do have a question from Olivia Hutchinson.
I agree with everything you said.
I agree. So that's my impression of April, by the way. So Olivia is saying, I have a question about reasonable goals and weight loss. I'm starting this program out this week, and I'm figuring out to eat these daily macros. She's 239 pounds and I have a lot to lose. Once I figure this out and regularly eating the macros she'll set for me, am I crazy to try to get toes to bar by the open next spring? I think that is probably, well, it depends on it depends on how good of an athlete you are. I can tell you that we have an athlete in our gym that was a Division III basketball player. I believe she's like 210 pounds. She can do toes to bar. She can do pull-ups. She is a freak, though. I mean, she is just an athlete. I mean, you just you know, like, I mean, it was funny. We were playing softball with her this summer, and like the teams would just not recognize that she was going to hit it over their head every single time. You know, she's just a naturally gifted athlete. Um, she says, I don't know what kind of fat loss is typical with ETP, and I like to make some reasonable gymnastic body weight goals. I'm a pretty heavy lifter and I have a good sense of progression with weightlifting, but I'm assuming I can't begin to do toes to bar pull-ups until I'm at least under 200 pounds. I would probably agree with that, and probably even further than that. I don't know many people that are over 200, or many females over 200 pounds that can do that. Right now I can hang on a bar for about 20 seconds. I've dieted my whole life, and this seems like a more measured way of losing fat. What kind of weight loss should I expect to be normal, and what kinds of goals are reasonable to set? Well, even in your instance, I would like to see you stick to a 1 pound per week goal, and this is why. My guess is, because you said you came from a dieting background, that you probably weren't eating an adequate amount of food, even though you were holding on to fat. So to a certain extent, the adequate amount of food is where we need to kind of get you initially. And you probably will see some weight loss. I mean, we do see weight loss even as people are kind of regulating their calories for people in your situation. So realistically, could you do toes to bar? Could you do there is a strength portion to it, but just being completely honest with you, it's weight related. You know, I mean, what is your height, Olivia? Maybe because if you're, let's say, 5'10", then that changes the equation a little bit. 5'6", so I would say I don't know many women at 5'6", as an example, that can do pull-ups or toes to bar. Well, I'm just trying to think. Well, toes to bar is a little different, because here's the thing with toes to bar. And one of the things you might want to progress with would be toes through rings rather than toes to bar. That might be a middle ground that you can look towards, because you can get a little bit more momentum. And I think toes to rings is actually better. It develops kind of a lower, that lower part of the abdomen that we don't work a lot, because we tend to work in constriction. But you're probably looking at, you know, wanting to be in that 170 to 180 before you can start looking at that. So you go, well, you know, that seems a far way away. It really isn't. I mean, if we're talking 1 pound a week for a year, right, and you're 240 right now, that brings you to 190. My guess is, you know, if you're already working as an athlete, you're already strong, you might be able to get a toes to bar at 190. But, you know, I think setting up goals like that is just going to be disappointing for you. I think that I would really focus more on your squats and things of that nature, things that probably are more wheelhouse events for you. Really focusing on things like body weight squats and progressing and kind of working through the timing of that. Those are the things that ultimately, I think what ends up happening in a situation like yours is you spend a lot of time kind of spinning your wheels on things that you could be doing better stuff. Like in my situation, I don't do toes to bar. And the reason, it's not that I can't do toes to bar. I can totally do toes to bar. But the toes to bar puts a lot of stress on my lower back the way that I need to do them. I can't do like I'm really tight in my hamstrings, and so my flexibility as it relates to my legs gets really tough. And so I have to do kind of a swing, to get up. I would consider that almost a cheat, if you're swinging to get up. Now, if you want to do it and you want to try it and you're able to get there, awesome. That would be a great accomplishment. But it doesn't mean that, that's an effective exercise for you. And so for me, if it's a Y with toes to bar, I do practice toes to bar quite a bit slow though. But if I'm practicing toes to bar, I'm not doing the swing. I'm really doing more of kind of like that sandwich move where you're that you see all the CrossFit Games athletes doing, where they're kind of sandwich right into the movement where it's 1, 2, 3. I can string like 3 of those together, but then when it's a toes to bar workout and it requires 20, then all of a sudden, I'm going to have to miss 2 workouts because there's too much stress on my back, so I just do knees to chest at that point. Does that make sense? I think for you, you'd be much better off figuring out some goals that would be more achievable along the way. One of the things I say related to weight, for people, because they'll say, well, I have 50 pounds to lose or I have 20 pounds to lose, and I say, you do not. You only have 5 pounds to lose, right? And I think I'll speak for myself. I went from 225 pounds to 150 pounds, okay? I did it 5 pounds at a time. That's the way you eat the elephant, little chunks at a time, and I think it's just more enjoyable experience that way as well, right? So if you go in, this is what, I tell, a lot of people that I know, and to a certain extent, I'm similar to you in a lot of ways, even now. I'm strong, which might be a residual of when I was a bigger athlete. I'm not really sure, what that is, but strength has really been a focus for me for a long time. So some of the body weight stuff and things of this nature, those just aren't things that I'm going to focus a lot of energy on that will sort of distract me from my end game. For you, your end game really ends up being making sure that you're doing a lot of the stuff that you're good at. For instance, if you're good at squatting, okay, you'd be much better off, bang for buck, squatting more than trying to work through a progression related to a toes to bar, right? So, and I realize we all need to be varied and we need to work on our weaknesses and things of this nature. The reality is that toes to bar isn't your weakness. Fat loss at this point plays a bigger point for your toes to bar and pull-ups than your strength does. But even though running is probably not going to be a wheelhouse type of thing, that would be something I would say that you could still work on from a standpoint of getting better. You'll see big gains, as an example, with your running with 5 pounds, with 10 pounds, right? So you'll go from doing a 400 meter in 3 minutes to doing a 400 meter in 2:45 and then 2:30 and then 2 minutes as your weight starts to come down. So what you're setting up is just this positive thing, right? And so kind of focusing on things that I think would kind of set you up for success would be my approach and my suggestion for you. And I'm just trying to mentally think, and for some reason today I am really struggling mentally, but saying this is music to my ears. I love to lift. Okay, so now here's the deal. If you love to lift, my guess is you love to lift for 2s and 3s, right? You need to start loving to lift for 10s and 15s and 20s. Those are the things, because you can use your strength. I feel like a person in your situation who's already strong, right? Shannon, in the blog recipe blogger for our site, within 8 months, she had never ever squatted in her life. Within 8 months, she had a squat of 280 pounds. But like you, she she would work smaller reps. And so I'd like to see you, don't work up to 20s immediately because your cardiovascular system will be a limiting factor there, but definitely start working up to 5s and then 8s and then 10s. And those are some of the things that you progress on. And oh, by the way, an 8-rep PR is a PR. And so count that, and those are the little things that you can set yourself up with for success, because, it's sort of easy to sort of get focused on the fat loss portion of things. I can tell you this right now. If you can go from squatting, let's say 3 reps to 5 reps to 8 reps to 10 reps, what you've done essentially is added work capacity, and that's only going to be favorable for fat loss. If you've read Metflex, if you've read any of the stuff that we talk about all the time, it's not just about building muscle. It's about building more useful muscle. And so that's a big part of the equation. And when you add in more reps, it makes your muscle more useful, and I think that'll be helpful for you. Is that making sense? Is there a system for lifting with that kind of high rep gains? We do have a system that I actually use. April is talking about Hatch. Hatch would be a great program. So, those are all things that you could try. But on the site, if you go into the search bar and type in Chad Smith, there are high volume workouts that you can look at. And that's for squat. It says for squats, but it also works for deadlifts and things of that nature. So, so I would take a look at that. Of course, I've left open Facebook.
I mean, I actually I'm just going to add my 2 cents in here.
Yeah.
I actually like the idea. I use the strategy all the time in the forum of making short-term goals, exactly like what you were saying. The 5-pound goals, you chip away, hit your first goal, and then you make a second goal, and then a third goal. Making a 5-pound goal is a lot more easily attainable than saying, well, I want to lose 40 pounds, by X date, or, whatever. You hit your first 5 pounds, and then you move to your second 5 pounds, and so forth. So.
Yeah, Steve was asking if it's Chad Wesley Smith, and yes, it is Chad Wesley Smith. The seminar that I mentioned earlier with Sean Waxman was Chad Wesley Smith's Unstoppable, which was an amazing, I mean, literally some of the best trainers and athletes I've ever seen in real life. And just so much of a learning experience. And for some reason, Chad's always been really nice to me, and I really appreciated that along the way. So we support them whatever they do, because they're the top of the industry as far as we're concerned. See, Sheldon is asking, brand new to the forum, what I'm struggling with is I compete in Olympic weightlifting, and I've tried 2 apps, and there seems to be no consistency on how to figure out how much calories I'm expending. Is an area in the forum where I might get help to figure that out? I wouldn't say that there is, there's not a great app for how much you expend weightlifting. And to a certain extent, we talked a little bit about this earlier, especially if you're not doing a lot of metabolic conditioning. I mean, the real answer is not much. You're not really burning a whole lot of calories, and so you have to make sure that you're kind of keeping your intake in check. I know a good resource in the forum would be Jill. I'm assuming, April, that Jill is still training as an Olympic weightlifter?
Yeah, actually, she's not training as an Olympic lifter. I think she's doing more of a powerlifting now.
Okay. but that's really not going to be vastly different.
Yeah.
You know, if you're not doing a ton of cardio work as accessory work, that's, like I said, my current um, strategy where I'm kind of powerlifting on one end of the week and then doing long runs on the other end of the week is not very normal, right? Normally, people are going to try and either get strong or get better at metabolic conditioning. And so this is just my attempt at kind of meeting in the middle, and it's really more about health for me. But I would say for you, I mean, weightlifting, the most you would burn would be 500 calories. That would be my guess. Um, there are apps that try to give it to you, but most of it's based off of the heart rate, and so you're not going to get your heart rate up except for about what, 5 seconds, 6 seconds, and so even though your heart rate will go up in an extreme manner, and then it will come down through all those different zones. It'll only take 2 to 3 minutes to do that. So you're really not expending a ton of energy. But what you are doing is building stronger, more useful muscle. And that's also really super helpful as it relates to your metabolism. And so, what you see with a lot of really strong people, with power lifters, Olympic lifters, these types of people, is they, as long as they're eating adequate amounts of food, they end up building good, strong muscle, and it allows them to eat a good amount of food the good majority of the time. The one caveat I will say, and like I said, in response to Steve's question, I was around a lot of Olympic weightlifters 2 weekends ago, and a lot of them are very conscious of the amount of food that they eat because they're trying to stay in a specific weight class. And so I would definitely get a hold of, what you're taking in right now, getting in an adequate amount of macro, getting in an adequate amount of protein, carbohydrate, fats, things of this nature, but also, not trying to stray too far, because the closer you are to your weight, the less weight that you have to drop. And if you do it competitively, as an example, you only have a 2-hour window to drop weight, and so you have to be really close to the weight that you compete in. Is any of this helpful at all? Because frankly, you're just not going to be burning a lot of calories when you're working out. There is all the acronyms are lost on me tonight, but EPOC, which
yeah,
post-exercise oxygen consumption or whatever, that is favorable. So you tend to burn calories after that. Let's see, thank you. It helps very much. Sadly, I'm a heavyweight. My coach wants 40 pounds off of me, but I've been struggling with my diet. I would not, I would definitely focus on getting the weight down. But what happens with a lot of weightlifting or wrestling or whatever is people go to extremes, and they go to a low carbohydrate way of eating, or doing a lot of water adjustments and things of this nature that kind of don't end up landing them where they want to go. If you're a heavyweight, you could probably lose somewhere close to 2 pounds a week, pretty comfortably for a while, right? And so if you do that, just make sure that you're not going super low with calories, because you don't need to for 2 pounds, right? But if you find, as an example, so let me give you an example. Okay, people go, well, Paul, you want us to lose 1 pound a week. What would you have me do if I were down 3 pounds? Well, I would have you eat. I would have you increase your calories or look at what caused you to lose so much weight so quickly, right? Because oftentimes a lot of people will go, I'm just losing weight really super easily. Well, part of the reason is your intake was never really super high. So a lot of people come in and go, well, I'm only moderately active, and then all of a sudden they start eating adequate amounts of food. They had 2 days of workouts, maybe a little bit of running. They're feeling more energetic. They're feeling, and all of a sudden they're working off these macros that aren't really a good fit. So you have to constantly adjust that. So even in your situation where you have a fair amount of fat to lose, if you're down 3 or 4 pounds that week, you probably want to factor it over an average of, say, 5 to 6 weeks. And so if you're down, say, 12 pounds over 6 weeks, that's fine. Okay, but if you end up being down 30 pounds in 6 weeks, you're probably losing muscle, and as a result, you're probably going to lose strength, and that's not going. Your coach definitely isn't going to be happy with that. So I hope that makes sense. I'm losing my voice. For some reason, I can't think today. I think part of it has to do with it's just a Monday, and I've been crazy busy. And once again, I did not allow April to talk very much. And frankly, she is very smart, and you guys should listen to her in the forums, and you will have the ability to talk to her uninterrupted in the forum, so that ends up being a plus. Any thoughts as we close out the webinar, April?
No, just anybody that has any questions, just get in the forum. I know Olivia and was it Shelly, the last lady?
I think it's Shellen Thomas.
Shellen and Olivia. Just if you get in the forum, we'll get you some macros and some guidance and more specifics and details and everything, kind of giving you step by step on what to do.
I mean, I just really, really hope that people understand the resource there, and to a certain extent, it's your way of being accountable, and trying to once and for all figure out how this all works. So anyway, I appreciate everybody's great questions. This probably isn't going to be one of the ones that we shared, man. I felt like I started the good majority of the thing, but I appreciate everybody being here. Hopefully we'll do better next week, and I'll talk to you later. Thanks.